My wife mistakenly got involved with her boss in the parking lot at her office. I teamed up with his wife, and here's how we got back at them. Clifton had always cherished the simpler aspects of life, finding joy in love and companionship. This worldview was shattered one evening when he witnessed a scene in the parking lot of his wife's office. His wife, Claire, was with her boss, Thierry, in a moment that broke the routine of an otherwise ordinary Thursday. Clifton had planned to pick Claire up and share dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant, as they often did. Instead, he was greeted by a scene that seemed like a surreal drama. Under the dim light of a street lamp, Claire and Thierry were locked in an embrace, their kiss a clear symbol of betrayal. Clifton felt a mix of shock and sorrow as he watched from the shadows, his heart pounding in disbelief. He drove home alone, the car's silence contrasting sharply with the turmoil in his mind. The images of Claire and Thierry haunted him, each replay a new wave of pain. He questioned how long this had been happening and whether he had been oblivious to it all. Sitting in the dark living room, the only light coming from a TV he wasn't watching, Clifton waited for Claire. When she arrived, her face flushed and eyes avoiding his, the tension was palpable. She offered a feeble excuse about traffic, but it hung in the air, unconvincing. Clifton remained silent, torn between love and a sense of betrayal. He wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but he also feared the truth and the potential collapse of the life he thought they shared. That night, they lay in bed, separated by a gulf of silence and secrets. Clifton stared at the ceiling, imagining his world falling apart. In the days that followed, life became a hollow routine. At work, he felt detached, and at home, conversations with Claire were forced and superficial. The mention of Thierry's name was a constant reminder of the betrayal. Yet, through the emotional chaos, Clifton began to find a sense of resolve. He wasn't one to confront aggressively or wallow in self-pity. He sought answers and understanding, and above all, he needed to regain his dignity. As a software engineer, Clifton had always excelled at deciphering complex codes and systems. Now, he was determined to apply these skills to uncover the truth. He meticulously planned his approach, aiming to penetrate the company's network. His goal was to gather evidence, not just of Claire's affair with Thierry, but anything that could undermine Thierry's standing. In the quiet of the night, Clifton sat before his computer, its screen casting the only light in the room. This endeavor was more than a search for truth, it was the start of his vengeance. Every keystroke marked his departure from the person he once was, moving towards an identity he never envisioned for himself. In this dark chapter of betrayal, Clifton found his new purpose, a course of retaliation and, perhaps, eventual solace. Clifton's transformation from a wronged husband to a man with a mission was gradual, driven by deep-seated anger and the sharp pain of betrayal. He realized that confronting Thierry directly would be futile, given Thierry's influence and power. Clifton needed a more impactful strategy, one that would strike Thierry in his most vulnerable aspects, his reputation and career. The plan was straightforward yet fraught with risk: infiltrate Thierry's company network to find damning evidence. As a software engineer, Clifton had the necessary expertise, but he had to tread carefully. Any misstep could lead to legal repercussions or alert Thierry, compromising the element of surprise. Clifton's fingers moved rapidly over the keyboard in the dimly lit room. His computer screen displayed a plethora of code lines and open windows, each serving as a portal into the digital fortress he aimed to infiltrate. He began by assessing the company's external security, searching for any weaknesses that would allow entry, akin to finding the correct combination to unlock a complex mechanism. As days turned into nights, Clifton's life outside this mission diminished. He called in sick at work, ate sparingly, and interacted with Claire only when necessary. His home office became his command center, a secluded space where he orchestrated his retribution. Eventually, Clifton discovered a vulnerability in the company's email server. It was a precarious entry point, but his only option. He meticulously devised a plan to exploit this flaw, carefully concealing his digital tracks as he delved deeper into the network. Within the company's virtual walls, Clifton felt like an invisible yet omnipresent entity. He meticulously examined emails, financial records, and confidential communications, searching for incriminating evidence against Thierry. Then, one fateful night, Clifton uncovered what he was looking for. Buried within complex financial documents, he found clear signs of embezzlement, significant funds diverted to private accounts, including Thierry's. His pulse quickened as he unearthed more proof of fraud and mismanagement, realizing he had finally obtained the evidence he needed to bring Thierry down. But Clifton wasn't finished. He sought something more personal, a direct link between Thierry and the affair with Claire. His focus shifted to Thierry's private messages, looking for any reference to Claire. It was a meticulous and arduous task, but Clifton was fueled by a deep-seated need for justice, or perhaps revenge. Eventually, he stumbled upon it, a series of emails between Thierry and Claire that unequivocally confirmed their affair. The words on his screen were a painful blow, yet they also provided the means for Clifton to retaliate. Having securely saved the evidence, Clifton began strategizing his next steps. He needed to be cautious and astute in how he deployed this information. A direct leak could lead back to him, so he had to find a more discreet method. As dawn's first light filtered through the curtains, Clifton leaned back in his chair, feeling a mixture of weariness and fulfillment. He possessed the evidence to ruin Thierry's career and reputation. The forthcoming actions were crucial, but Clifton was prepared. This battle was no longer solely about revenge, it was about unveiling the truth and reclaiming his own life. In the subsequent days, Clifton's life became a whirlwind of planning and expectation. He was acutely aware of the power he held to dismantle Thierry's carefully constructed facade. Yet, the significance of his findings weighed heavily on him. These were more than just digital files, they were concrete evidence of betrayal and corruption. Clifton's detail-oriented nature required a carefully devised strategy for exposing the evidence. A direct confrontation was too perilous, and he realized the need for an ally, someone else driven by a desire for justice, or perhaps, vengeance. Fate intervened, leading Clifton to cross paths with Thierry's wife, Isabelle, in a local coffee shop. Clifton recognized her from company photos, always the picture-perfect corporate spouse. But now, her eyes betrayed a deep-seated fatigue, hinting at her own struggles. They began talking, two strangers finding common ground in the awkwardness of casual conversation. Clifton learned that Isabelle harbored suspicions about Thierry's infidelity but lacked concrete proof. This encounter was a revelation for Clifton. He had found someone who could relate, another victim of Thierry's duplicity. Clifton deliberated over sharing his findings with Isabelle. Trusting a stranger, especially someone so close to Thierry, was risky. Yet, seeing the familiar pain in her eyes, Clifton decided to take a chance and disclosed the full extent of Thierry's betrayal, both in his personal and professional life. Isabelle was initially overwhelmed by the revelation. However, shock quickly turned into resolute determination. She suggested they join forces to bring Thierry down. Seeing the determination in her eyes, Clifton agreed. They were now united in their quest for retribution, each driven by their own experiences of betrayal. Their meetings grew more frequent as they devised a plan that was complex and daring. They aimed to reveal Thierry's embezzlement and fraud to both the authorities and the public. However, they were careful to ensure the evidence couldn't be traced back to them. Isabelle, with her in-depth knowledge of the company, provided invaluable insights. Clifton, leveraging his technical skills, made certain all digital trails were obscured. They chose to use anonymous email accounts and encrypted messaging for communication with the media and law enforcement. As their strategy solidified, so did their camaraderie. A silent understanding and mutual purpose united them, transcending mere revenge. Both having been deeply hurt, they sought healing in rectifying a grievous wrong. In Isabelle, Clifton found a confidant who empathized with his concerns and frustrations. Conversely, Isabelle found in Clifton a soul who comprehended her pain. Their discussions often strayed from their plans, touching on personal hopes, dreams, fears, and regrets. Yet, underneath this developing friendship, the core of their mission always remained. They were embarking on a journey that would transform not just their lives but also those around them. It was a perilous path laden with ethical dilemmas, but they were resolved to traverse it together. As the decisive day approached, Clifton and Isabel braced for the consequences. They were on the verge of destabilizing Thierry's empire. There was no turning back. Their alliance, forged from betrayal, was poised to act, ready to alter their world irrevocably. Finally, the day they had meticulously prepared for arrived. It was a day anticipated to be the climax of their intertwined narratives of betrayal and vengeance. The plan was in motion, the elements aligned, the sense of expectancy intense. In the early morning, Clifton sat at his computer for a final review, ensuring that every digital footprint leading back to them was erased. The emails, loaded with evidence of Thierry's financial misconduct and undeniable proof of his affair with Claire, were queued to be dispatched to various media entities and authorities. Their timing was strategic, set just hours before a significant shareholder meeting at Thierry's company. Isabel had a pivotal role. Present at the meeting as the seemingly oblivious wife, she was also tasked with making sure the evidence reached key individuals inside the company. Her internal connections were vital to their strategy, lending the story both credibility and urgency. As Clifton pressed the final key, initiating their plan, he experienced an odd tranquility. This was more than mere revenge, it was a pursuit of justice. He visualized Thierry's shock as the news broke, his life unraveling while he struggled to rationalize the inexplicable. The news struck with overwhelming force. By mid-morning, it had spread everywhere: a CEO caught in financial fraud and an illicit affair, a company's reputation shattered. Clifton watched the unfolding chaos from his computer, the digital sphere abuzz with the scandal. Isabel phoned him from the company, her voice blending shock with a sense of victory. "It's complete chaos here," she murmured. "Thierry's been taken out by security, and there's an emergency board meeting." "We did it, Clifton." The repercussions were swift and severe. Thierry was suspended pending an investigation, his reputation decimated. The company's stock took a nosedive, and authorities commenced their investigations. Clifton and Isabel observed from the sidelines, their roles as the information source remaining concealed. However, as the day wore on, Clifton's sense of triumph diminished, giving way to a nagging disquiet. He saw Claire's reaction, her face etched with shock and disbelief, unaware of his involvement. He pondered whether his pursuit of vengeance had escalated too far, questioning the overall cost of their actions. Isabel also grappled with the aftermath. Her marriage was finished, her life irrevocably changed. She had sought retribution, but now, witnessing her world collapse, she doubted its worth. In the days that followed, the scandal continued to dominate headlines. Clifton and Isabel kept a low profile, their interactions reduced. The connection they had forged seemed to unravel in the harsh light of their deeds. They had transitioned from victims to the orchestrators of another's downfall. Clifton contended with mixed emotions. He had aimed to inflict on Thierry the pain he had endured, but the tangible impact of his actions weighed heavily on him. His actions had caused profound harm, not just to Thierry but to many others inadvertently involved. With the revenge chapter concluding, Clifton was left to contemplate the consequences of his actions. He had sought justice but was left with a hollow triumph. The truth was out, but at what cost? His journey brought him to a crucial junction, where the way forward was murky and the repercussions of his actions loomed large and ominous. In the weeks following the revelation of Thierry's misdeeds, Clifton faced a period of deep introspection. The world outside continued to reel from the scandal's shockwaves, but within his home, a profound silence reigned. This silence was more than the absence of noise, it embodied the heavy realization of the true cost of revenge. Clifton found himself wrestling with a range of emotions. There was a brief sense of satisfaction from accomplishing his goal, yet it quickly gave way to a feeling of hollowness. He had hoped for vindication and closure, but instead, he encountered an expanding emptiness where his anger used to reside. Claire, unaware of Clifton's involvement in the scandal, faced her own struggles. The affair had been a regrettable error in judgment, and the scandal's public nature only intensified her guilt and shame. Their home, once a sanctuary of love and trust, now seemed like a tomb of their past life. Amidst this personal chaos, Clifton received a call from Isabel. It had been weeks since their last conversation. The connection they had, born from mutual betrayal and a quest for revenge, had diminished in the aftermath. Hearing her voice, however, revived a surge of past emotions. They arranged to meet at a modest cafe, a place detached from the complexities of their entangled lives. Isabel appeared changed, her eyes reflected a newfound determination and a subtle strength that was previously absent. Isabel opened the conversation with introspective thoughts. "What we did, it was necessary, but I feel like we lost part of ourselves in that process," she said with a steady voice. Clifton agreed, feeling that her words mirrored his sentiments. Their conversation extended for hours, shifting away from the scandal and Thierry, focusing instead on their personal experiences. It was a talk that revolved around healing and comprehending the scars left by their pursuit of revenge. Isabel shared her decision to start over, to move away from the turmoil and the haunting memories. Her plans were tinged with cautious hope, a yearning for inner peace and, possibly, eventual forgiveness. Clifton felt a connection with her path. He, too, needed to chart a new course, to reconstruct the remnants of his life. Their conversation marked a poignant goodbye, closing a chapter that had irrevocably altered their lives. Returning home, Clifton confronted Claire. It was time to address the fractures in their relationship. In a lengthy and emotionally charged discussion, they exposed their sorrows and regrets. Clifton realized that his vendetta, though aimed at Thierry, had also inflicted damage on Claire and their marriage. The journey towards recovery was gradual and fraught with uncertainty. Clifton and Claire underwent counseling to work through the intricate emotions and trust issues afflicting their marriage. Their progress was marked by ups and downs, moments of optimism interspersed with times of despair. Clifton also sought his own form of redemption. He started volunteering at a local community center, finding comfort in aiding others. It was a modest but significant beginning, a means for him to transform his experiences into something constructive. As the narrative draws to a close, the future of Clifton and Claire remains indeterminate. Yet, there's a glimmer of hope, a faint beacon at the end of a lengthy and challenging passage. Clifton's pursuit of revenge had led to a void. Now, he was on a quest for forgiveness and healing, not only for himself but also for those he had wronged. The concluding chapter of Clifton's story is one of self-reflection and renewal. It serves as a reminder that the search for vengeance often culminates in unanticipated outcomes, and that true strength is found in the capacity to forgive and begin anew. I learned that my wife was cheating on me with her boss. To get back at her, I took something very important to her and sought revenge in a severe way. Klaus had always taken pride in his ability to distinguish truth from lies. As a prominent lawyer, his career was founded on the skill of dissecting layers of deceit to uncover concealed realities. Nevertheless, nothing could have prepared him for the revelation he was about to stumble upon in his own home. It happened on a nondescript Thursday evening when Klaus returned home earlier than usual. The house, typically filled with Christine's vibrant presence, was eerily quiet, sending an unsettling feeling coursing through him. He called out for her, but there was no response. Baffled, Klaus made his way to their home office, a space where Christine often dedicated hours to her projects. The glow of the computer screen immediately drew his attention. It was unusual for Christine to leave her computer running. Driven by an insistent curiosity, Klaus approached the desk. There, on the screen, lay an open email, clearly not intended for his eyes. The words blurred as he absorbed the exchange between Christine and Aaron, her boss. It wasn't the flirtatious tone or the affectionate words that caught his attention first, it was the blunt acknowledgement of their ongoing affair. As Klaus read and reread the email, the room seemed to whirl around him. Each word felt like a heavy blow to his heart. Betrayal, a concept he had often encountered within courtrooms, had now infiltrated his own marriage. Christine and Aaron, two individuals he had placed unwavering trust in, had woven a tangled web of falsehoods, and he had unwittingly walked right into it. For a brief moment, Klaus was immobilized, the shock holding him in place. Then, the lawyer within him surged to life. He began systematically gathering evidence, forwarding the incriminating emails to his personal account, and taking screenshots. His legal mind, trained for battles in the courtroom, was already crafting a strategic plan. However, beneath the composed calculations, a tempest of emotions raged: anger, hurt, disbelief, a turbulent mix that threatened to shatter his usual stoic demeanor. Hours later, when Christine returned home, she found Klaus sitting in darkness, the computer screen's faint glow casting somber shadows across his face. "Klaus, you're home early," she remarked, her voice tinged with surprise. "Is everything all right?" For a moment, Klaus contemplated confronting her. But as he looked up at her, he realized that this was not the time for emotional confrontations. This was a game of strategy, not a brawl. "Everything's fine," he replied with a calmness he did not truly feel. "Just wrapping up some work." Christine appeared relieved and vanished into the kitchen. Klaus listened to the sound of her movements, a once comforting noise that now served as a stark reminder of the deceit that had infiltrated his life. That evening, Klaus lay awake, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. Images of Christine and Aaron, sharing laughter at company functions, flickered through his mind. He dwelled on the late nights Christine had claimed to be working and the business trips she had undertaken. Each piece of the puzzle fit together, constituting a breach of their marital vows. As dawn broke, Klaus made a resolution. He would not let this betrayal go unanswered. He would utilize every available tool to exact a revenge that was precise, lawful, and devastating. This was not merely a personal vendetta, it was a pursuit of justice, the kind of justice a wounded heart sought in the aftermath of betrayal. The morning following his discovery presented a stark contrast for Klaus. The sun beamed brightly, birds sang outside the window, but within him, a tempest brewed. Sleep had eluded him, as his thoughts raced with plans and strategies. Today marked the commencement of his meticulous revenge campaign. Sitting at the breakfast table, exchanging superficial conversation with Christine, Klaus's mind was elsewhere. He was sketching the blueprint for his retaliation, with Aaron, the intruder into his life and marriage, as the primary target. Klaus recognized that, in his profession, information equated to power, and he possessed the means to unearth the darkest secrets. He commenced his day at the office, delving into Aaron's professional life. He had a gut feeling that Aaron, like many high-flying executives, harbored skeletons in his closet. It didn't take long for Klaus to uncover the initial signs of financial irregularities within Aaron's company, accounts that didn't reconcile, suspicious transactions, and unexplained expenditures. Leveraging his legal expertise and network, Klaus gathered evidence, assembling a case of corporate misconduct. He had to tread cautiously, aware that any direct accusation from him might be perceived as a personal vendetta. He opted to assume the role of a whistleblower, an anonymous champion of justice. He compiled a comprehensive dossier of evidence and forwarded it to the regulatory authorities, ensuring his involvement remained concealed. The consequences of his actions didn't manifest immediately, but Klaus was patient. He understood that the wheels of justice turned slowly yet inevitably. In the interim, he observed Aaron and Christine persisting in their charade, oblivious to the impending storm. Several weeks later, the initial fissures began to surface. Aaron's company became the target of a regulatory investigation, sparking rumors and a sharp drop in stock prices. Aaron found himself under immense pressure, his demeanor shifting from charming to tense and harried. Christine noticed the change as well. She grew increasingly concerned about Aaron, inundating him with calls and messages that became more frequent and desperate. Klaus observed all of this with a detached composure. It was an unusual sensation, orchestrating the downfall of the man for whom his wife cared deeply, yet it fueled his sense of justice, primal and unwavering. As the probe into Aaron's company grew more intense, Klaus found himself assuming a dual role. By day, he played the part of the supportive husband, offering a steady shoulder for Christine to lean on. By night, he acted as the mastermind behind her lover's impending downfall. The dual nature of his existence drained him, but he couldn't halt his actions now. He had ventured too far down this path. The chapter concluded with Klaus sitting alone in his office late at night, the sole illumination emanating from his computer screen. He had just received an update on the investigation, and it was gaining traction, with Aaron at the epicenter. Klaus leaned back in his chair, a cold sense of satisfaction settling in his heart. The initial strike had proven successful, but this was only the beginning. More needed to be accomplished, more pain had to be inflicted. The game had just commenced, and Klaus was resolute about winning it. The aftermath of the initial attack had set the stage for Klaus's next move. He observed as Aaron struggled with the intensifying investigation, his once unshakable confidence visibly eroded. Christine, too, felt the impact, her anxiety for Aaron casting a pall over her formerly carefree demeanor. It was time for Klaus to weave the next layer of his intricate revenge plan. Klaus understood that to truly dismantle Aaron, he had to launch attacks from various angles. He initiated efforts to undermine Aaron's support network within the company. Employing his legal connections and influence, Klaus subtly sowed seeds of doubt and mistrust among Aaron's closest allies. He discreetly circulated anonymous tips about potential involvement in financial improprieties, planting suspicions that took root quickly. Simultaneously, Klaus began to manipulate Christine's perception of Aaron. He skillfully dropped hints about Aaron's past transgressions, feigning ignorance regarding their affair. He casually mentioned how colleagues often betrayed one another during crises. These subtle insinuations were designed to exploit Christine's insecurities, causing her to question Aaron's loyalty and motives. Christine's trust in Aaron began to waver. She confronted Aaron about the rumors and allegations, further adding to his stress. Their relationship, initially built on secretive glances and stolen moments, couldn't withstand such pressure. The strain became evident, their once passionate affair reduced to hushed arguments and anxious whispers. Klaus observed this unfolding with detached efficiency. Every move was meticulously calculated, every outcome anticipated. Yet, amid this carefully orchestrated turmoil, he felt an indescribable pang. Was it remorse? Sympathy? He pushed these emotions aside. This was not the time for sentimentality. As the investigation into Aaron's company deepened, more evidence of misconduct surfaced. Klaus had ensured that the trail of evidence pointed directly at Aaron, portraying him as the mastermind behind the financial irregularities. Aaron's downfall was swift. The board distanced themselves from him, and he was eventually suspended, awaiting the investigation's outcome. Christine was devastated. She had never fathomed that her affair would lead to such catastrophic repercussions. Her guilt was tangible, and she began to withdraw, her former self fading into a mere shadow. Klaus observed her transformation with a sense of hollowness in his victory. He had achieved his revenge, but the price had been much steeper than he had anticipated. The chapter reached its conclusion with Klaus sitting in his study, the weight of his actions bearing heavily on his shoulders. He had accomplished what he had set out to do, yet the satisfaction he had expected to feel was conspicuously absent. Instead, a growing emptiness pervaded him, a realization that his quest for vengeance had altered him in ways he couldn't reverse. The boundaries between justice and vengeance had blurred, leaving him in a moral gray area. As he contemplated his next steps, Klaus knew one thing for certain: the game was far from its conclusion. In the subsequent weeks, the landscape of Klaus's meticulously planned revenge began to undergo a transformation. The once vibrant Aaron had become a mere shadow of his former self, suspended and publicly disgraced. Christine, entangled in the scandal's vortex, found herself isolated and torn. However, as Klaus observed the aftermath, a subtle shift occurred within him. The thrill of vengeance was gradually being replaced by a thoughtful contemplation of the collateral damage. Klaus found himself standing at a crossroads. The relentless pursuit of revenge had consumed him, but now, in the quiet aftermath, he began to question the true toll of his actions. The victory he had envisioned felt hollow, devoid of the sweet satisfaction he had anticipated. The emotional burden borne by Christine, the woman he had once loved despite her betrayal, weighed heavily on him. For her part, Christine was a complex tapestry of guilt and remorse. The affair, which had commenced as an exhilarating escape, had transformed into a nightmarish ordeal. Her relationship with Aaron, now strained and tainted by the scandal, served as a constant reminder of the chaos she had played a part in creating. She yearned for a semblance of normalcy, but with each passing day, it appeared more distant, like a fading dream. Aaron, stripped of the power and prestige that had once defined him, grappled with the consequences of his actions. His fall from grace transcended the professional realm, delving into the personal domain. The investigation had laid bare his transgressions, and the court of public opinion had rendered its harsh verdict. Amidst this turmoil, Klaus found himself in a state of introspection. The legal battle he had waged, while effective, was not just against Aaron but against his own sense of betrayal. However, the emotional triumph he sought remained elusive. The stark realization that revenge could not mend his wounded heart began to dawn on him. The satisfaction derived from witnessing Aaron's downfall was overshadowed by the complexity of his feelings toward Christine. As Klaus grappled with the harsh reality of his deteriorating marriage, he was compelled to confront the paradox of his revenge. His initial goal had been to punish Christine and Aaron, but now he found himself sharing in their suffering. The clear lines that once separated right from wrong, justice from vengeance, had merged into a murky, indistinct gray area. One evening, as Klaus sat alone in his study, he was taken aback by Christine's unexpected entrance. She stood there, displaying a blend of defiance and vulnerability, her eyes searching his for something elusive. The air was heavy with unspoken words, the years of their shared life hanging like a weight between them. "Klaus, we need to have a conversation." Christine's voice remained steady, but her eyes betrayed the inner turmoil. "I understand that what I did was unforgivable, and I don't expect you to comprehend it fully, but we cannot continue like this. We are tearing each other apart." The ensuing confrontation became a cathartic release of pent-up emotions. Accusations and confessions, regrets, and realizations were laid bare. Klaus listened as Christine bared her soul, her words a mixture of apology and explanation. The chapter came to an end with Klaus, once again alone, contemplating the ruins of his marriage and the remnants of his revenge. The recognition that his pursuit of retribution had led them both to an irreparable point was a bitter pill to swallow. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was undeniable: the game of revenge had exacted a heavy toll, a cost that was only now becoming painfully evident. As daylight broke over the city, Klaus sat in his office, replaying the events of the previous night in his mind. The candidness of their confrontation had left him drained yet strangely unburdened. It was as if the veil of anger and hurt that had obscured his vision was gradually lifting, revealing the stark reality of their situation. He had achieved his revenge, but at what price? The legal proceedings against Aaron had reached their inevitable conclusion. Aaron was officially ousted from the company, his reputation in tatters. The news should have brought Klaus a sense of closure, but instead, it felt like a Pyrrhic victory. As he read the headlines, Klaus couldn't help but feel a twinge of empathy for Aaron. Like himself, Aaron was a casualty in a war that had spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, Christine had transformed into a mere shadow of her former self. The vibrant, confident woman he had married had been replaced by someone subdued and introspective. The affair and its aftermath had taken a toll on her, peeling away the veneer of their marriage to reveal the underlying fractures. Klaus realized that their relationship had been unstable long before Aaron entered the picture. This realization struck Klaus like a revelation. In his relentless pursuit of punishing Christine and Aaron, he had lost sight of what truly mattered. The love and trust that had once defined his marriage to Christine had been replaced by a chasm of bitterness and remorse. He had been so fixated on winning the game that he hadn't paused to consider the consequences. Later that day, Christine visited Klaus's office. They sat across from each other, the emotional distance between them more significant than the physical. "Klaus, I've been reflecting," Christine began, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Perhaps it's time for us to confront the truth. We can't undo what's happened, but we can choose how we move forward." Klaus looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in months. He saw the weariness in her eyes, mirroring his own. "I understand," he replied softly. "I've been so consumed by the desire for retribution that I didn't see the cost of my revenge. I'm sorry, Christine. Sorry for the pain I've caused." The conversation that ensued was challenging but necessary. They discussed their failed marriage, their shattered dreams, and an uncertain future. It was a conversation devoid of blame, marked instead by a mutual acknowledgement of their shared shortcomings. As the sun set, casting long shadows in the office, Klaus and Christine arrived at a decision. They would part ways, not out of spite, but because they recognized that some things, once broken, could not be repaired. The decision was mutual, a final act of respect for the love they had once shared. The chapter concluded with Klaus alone in his office, the weight of the day's events weighing heavily on his shoulders. He had played the game of revenge to perfection, but ultimately, he had lost more than he had gained. The victory felt empty, and the spoils of war amounted to nothing more than memories of happier times. As he turned off the lights and stepped out of the office, Klaus understood that this chapter of his life had come to an end. It was time to start anew, to find a way forward in a world that had irrevocably changed. The game was over, and now it was time to pick up the pieces.
"I was unfaithful to my loving husband, who was really good with money. And now, he's taken everything away, and I'm left with nothing, no money, no job, and we're no longer married." Mike Reynolds was a man whose mind functioned like the intricate gears of a clock, precise and unerring. As a financial genius in the bustling heart of New York, he had built a reputation for transforming the most convoluted financial challenges into profitable ventures. However, nothing in his array of spreadsheets and forecasts could have prepared him for the discovery he was about to make. It was an ordinary Thursday evening when Mike first noticed something amiss. Working late in his study, a room adorned with shelves of economic treatises and framed stock market graphs, he decided to review their personal finances. As he combed through bank statements and credit card bills, a pattern began to emerge, one that was inconsistent with their usual spending habits. There were charges for boutique hotels, expensive jewelry, and lavish meals, none of which he recognized. Mike's heart sank as the realization dawned on him. His wife, Rosa, had always had a taste for the finer things in life, but these expenditures were beyond their agreed indulgences. A surge of emotions welled up inside him, confusion, hurt, but predominantly, a cold, seeping dread. Could Rosa be having an affair? In the days that followed, Mike observed Rosa with a heightened sense of awareness. She was the picture of elegance and grace, a woman who turned heads with her warm smile and vibrant laugh. They had met at a charity ball 10 years ago, and Mike had been smitten from the start. Rosa had seemed equally taken with him, enchanted by his intellect and quiet confidence. They had built a life together, a life Mike had thought was happy and fulfilling. Yet, the evidence was irrefutable. The secret meetings, the unexplained absences, the whispered phone calls, it all pointed to a clandestine affair. Mike felt a profound sense of betrayal, yet he knew that a direct confrontation would lead nowhere. Rosa was too shrewd, too composed, she would deny everything. Instead, Mike began to plot his revenge. It would not be a revenge born of rage or violence, but one that matched his nature, calculated, methodical, and devastatingly effective. He would use his skills to turn the tables, to channel Rose's ill-gotten gains into a cause that would leave her both financially and morally bankrupt. He started by setting up a series of shell companies and charity organizations. Each entity was meticulously crafted to appear as a legitimate investment opportunity. Then, using his expertise, Mike began the process of diverting funds from Rose's secret accounts into these organizations. The money, once a symbol of her betrayal, would now serve a greater good. As Mike worked late into the night, redirecting funds and weaving his intricate web, he couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. He had always prided himself on his integrity, on doing what was right. Yet here he was, orchestrating a scheme of revenge against his own wife. But as he sat there in the dim light of his study, surrounded by the tools of his trade, Mike Reynolds felt no remorse. The plan was set in motion, a cruel yet fitting retribution for a betrayal that had cut deeper than any financial loss ever could. In the heart of New York's financial district, Mike Reynolds sat in his office, surrounded by the hum of computers and the soft glow of screens. This was his domain, a place where numbers danced to his command, where fortunes were made and lost with the click of a mouse. But today, Mike's focus was not on the stock market or investment portfolios. Today, he was weaving a different kind of financial tapestry. The plan to unravel Rose's deceitful gains was in full swing. Mike had spent countless nights designing a network of shell companies and charitable organizations, each a cog in the grand machine of his revenge. These entities were crafted with meticulous care, bearing names that hinted at prosperity and growth, like Aurora Development Limited and Bountiful Horizons. To any onlooker, they were legitimate businesses, a testament to Mike's investment acumen. But their true purpose was far more personal. Through a series of complex transactions, Mike had started funneling Rose's illicit funds into these organizations. Each transfer was carefully masked, hidden beneath layers of financial jargon and bureaucratic obfuscation. To Rosa, it would seem as though her assets were growing, her secret fortune multiplying under the guise of shrewd investments. Mike took no joy in this deception. Each click, each transfer of funds, was a reminder of the life he thought he had, a life now tainted with betrayal. But he pushed forward, driven by a need for justice, for retribution. He knew that Rose's lover was partly funded by these secret accounts, and cutting off this illicit financial pipeline would be the first step in his revenge. Meanwhile, Rosa remained oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her feet. She continued her affair, ensnared in a web of lies and passion. Her days were spent in a blissful haze, moving from the luxurious confines of her lover's apartment to the opulent dinners and events they frequented together. But cracks were starting to show. As Mike redirected more and more funds, the lavish lifestyle Rosa and her lover had grown accustomed to began to wane. Expensive gifts became less frequent, and the once regular getaways started to dwindle. Rosa's lover, whose affection was as much for her wealth as for her, began to grow distant, his sweet nothings tinged with hints of frustration and greed. Back in his office, Mike watched this unraveling with a clinical detachment. He monitored Rosa's spending, the ebb and flow of her secret accounts, with the same precision he applied to his professional ventures. Each financial report, each bank statement, was a piece of the puzzle, a step closer to his ultimate goal. But even as he orchestrated this financial downfall, Mike couldn't escape the gnawing emptiness that had settled in his heart. He had once loved Rosa, had imagined growing old with her. Now, those dreams were replaced by cold, hard strategy. As the chapter closes, Mike is seen gazing out of his office window, overlooking the city that never sleeps. He had set in motion a plan that would leave Rosa financially and morally destitute, a plan born out of a betrayal that had shattered his world. But in the quiet of his office, amidst the soft whir of machines and the dim glow of screens, Mike Reynolds couldn't help but wonder, at what cost? Rosa Reynolds, once the embodiment of confidence and elegance, now found herself navigating through a labyrinth of confusion and uncertainty. Her world, once so secure and predictable, had begun to crumble around her, piece by piece, leaving her to grapple with a reality she could hardly recognize. As Mike's intricate plan continued to unfurl, the financial resources that Rosa had secretly amassed and relied upon began to wither away. The accounts she had so carefully concealed from Mike, filled with the spoils of her affair, were dwindling at an alarming rate. Yet, on paper, everything appeared prosperous. Her statements displayed a portfolio of investments flourishing, but whenever she attempted to access these funds, she encountered bureaucratic obstacles and unexpected delays. Her lover, Mark, a charming but opportunistic artist, had been drawn to Rosa not only for her vibrant personality but also for the lavish lifestyle she provided him. However, as the flow of luxury and indulgence began to wane, so did Mark's affections. Their relationship, once a passionate escape from her mundane marital life, had started to lose its allure, revealing the shallow foundations upon which it rested. Confused and increasingly isolated, Rosa attempted to confront Mike about the financial irregularities. Mike, always the epitome of composure and control, effortlessly deflected her inquiries. He spoke of market fluctuations and investment strategies, assuring her that their finances were stronger than ever. Yet, the reality of her depleting accounts told a different story. The stress of her crumbling financial empire and her deteriorating relationship with Mark was taking its toll on Rosa. She found herself wandering through their luxurious home, a home that had once symbolized their success and happiness, feeling like a stranger in her own life. The art pieces that adorned the walls, the designer furniture, the opulent decor, it all felt hollow, a gilded cage that was slowly closing in on her. Meanwhile, Mike observed from a distance, his plan advancing like a silent, relentless force. He monitored the transactions, the gradual redirection of funds, with a clinical precision. Each move was calculated, designed to leave Rosa not only financially destitute but also morally exposed. The charitable organizations he had established were flourishing, transforming Rosa's ill-gotten gains into a force for good. Yet, for Mike, there was no sense of triumph, only a hollow feeling of justice being served. As the chapter neared its conclusion, Rosa's world was depicted as a house of cards on the brink of collapse. Her affair, once an exhilarating adventure, had become a source of anxiety and heartache. Her financial security, which she had manipulated and concealed, was slipping through her grasp like sand. And Mike, the man she had betrayed, was the unseen architect of her downfall. In a poignant final scene, Rosa sat alone in her opulent living room, the shadows of evening slowly encroaching. The room, once a testament to her success and independence, now exuded a chilling, unwelcoming atmosphere. She came to the realization that the intricate web of lies and deception she had spun was falling apart, leaving her exposed and defenseless. The chapter concluded with Rosa gazing out of the window, her reflection a faint, ghostly silhouette against the backdrop of city lights, symbolizing her imminent isolation and despair. Rosa Reynolds, once the mistress of her own destiny, now found herself adrift in a sea of chaos and uncertainty. The financial empire she had covertly constructed was crumbling, and along with it, the facade of her dual life was beginning to fracture. Mike, her husband, had been the unwavering pillar in her life, the unassuming yet brilliant financial mind who had always appeared more interested in numbers than in the intricacies of human emotions. But as Rosa's world unraveled, she began to perceive a different aspect of Mike, one that was calculated, methodical, and, in its own way, as relentless as the business world in which he thrived. Her lover, Mark, had all but vanished, his affection dissipating as swiftly as her wealth. The realization struck Rosa with the force of a tidal wave. Her affair, once an exhilarating escapade, had been nothing more than a transaction, a facade of pretense and luxury that evaporated at the first sign of trouble. Desperate for answers and an escape route, Rosa confronted Mike. She accused him of mismanaging their finances, of squandering their fortune through negligence or, worse, deliberate subversion. But Mike's response was icy and well calculated. He disclosed, with chilling composure, his awareness of her affair and her financial deceit. He described how he had rerouted her ill-gotten gains, her secret hoard of wealth, into charitable causes. The investments and funds she believed were thriving were mere illusions, a mirage he had created to mask the true fate of her money. The truth struck Rosa like a physical blow. Her meticulously compartmentalized world had been a house of cards, and Mike was the tempest that had toppled it. The realization that she had been outwitted, that her dishonesty and betrayal had been met with a shrewd and calculated retaliation, was shattering. Mike initiated divorce proceedings, citing her infidelity and financial misconduct. He presented evidence of her affair and the funds she had diverted for her selfish desires. The courts were unsympathetic to Rosa's pleas. With her assets now entangled in charitable endeavors and her reputation in ruins, she was left with nothing. No alimony, no financial support, only the stark, unyielding reality of her actions. The chapter paints a somber portrait of Rosa's decline. She, who had once held the world within her grasp, was now without a job, her professional reputation in ruins due to the scandal. Friends in the social circles she had carefully cultivated over the years had turned their backs on her, unwilling to associate with a woman mired in such a public and humiliating downfall. The final scenes of the chapter stand in stark contrast to the life Rosa once led. Gone were the luxuries and opulence, replaced by a modest, sparsely furnished apartment tucked away in an unremarkable part of the city. Her days were now filled with fruitless job searches and the harsh reality of her isolation. As the chapter draws to a close, Rosa is seen gazing out of her apartment window, the distant city lights serving as a haunting reminder of a life now lost. In her eyes, there is a glimmer of realization, an understanding of the consequences of her actions and the irreversible damage they have wrought. The chapter ends with Rosa alone, a mere shadow of her former self, a woman brought low by her own pride and deceit. The final chapter of Rosa Reynolds' story unfolds in a markedly different world from the one she had once known. The days of opulence and carefree indulgence were gone, replaced by the harsh reality of her actions, as she lived in a small, dimly lit apartment far removed from the glittering lights of elite society. Rosa's once enviable social standing had crumbled, leaving her ostracized and abandoned by former friends and acquaintances. The scandal of her affair and the very public divorce had become fodder for gossip columns and social media, casting her as a pariah in the high society she had once frequented. Jobless and bereft of financial support, she spent her days sending out resumes, only to encounter rejection or, more often than not, deafening silence. The skills and experience she had once taken pride in seemed irrelevant in a world that now defined her by her personal failings. During these days of solitude and reflection, Rosa was compelled to confront the harsh reality of her actions. She replayed the years of her marriage, the secret rendezvous with Mark, and the intricate web of deception she had spun. The realization that her actions had not only shattered her marriage but also eroded her self-esteem was a bitter pill to swallow. Perhaps for the first time, she grasped the depth of pain she had inflicted on Mike, a man who had loved and trusted her. Meanwhile, Mike had moved forward with his life. His reputation as a financial genius had only been enhanced by the charitable initiatives he had funded with Rosa's diverted assets. He frequently appeared in business publications and at philanthropic events, lauded as a visionary who had transformed personal betrayal into a mission for societal good. However, despite his public persona, those close to him noted a certain coldness, a detachment that had not been present before. The climax of the chapter unfolded unexpectedly when Rosa crossed paths with Mike at a small cafe. It was a chance encounter neither had anticipated. Rosa observed the changes in Mike, the sharp lines etched onto his face, the guarded look in his eyes. There was a brief exchange of words in which Rosa attempted to convey her remorse and her understanding of the pain she had caused. However, Mike's response was curt, lacking the warmth or affection he had once held for her. Forgiveness had been granted, but the scars remained, a reminder of a trust irrevocably fractured. As Mike exited the cafe, Rosa was left to grapple with the finality of their relationship, the irreversible transformation in the man she had once loved. She comprehended that the consequences of her actions extended beyond the financial realm, causing wounds that might never fully heal. The chapter concluded with Rosa taking a stroll through a park, observing life passing by. She saw couples sharing laughter, families enjoying their time together, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to reminisce about the life she once lived, the dreams she had once shared with Mike. However, as the sun descended, casting elongated shadows across her path, Rosa recognized that this chapter of her life had come to a close. She now faced the task of forging a new path, one laden with uncertainty but also offering the prospect of redemption and self-discovery. The story reached its conclusion with Rosa gazing up at the night sky, the initial stars beginning to twinkle above. In their faint light, she perceived not an ending but the potential for a fresh start, a glimmer of hope amid the twilight of her fallen empire.
My wife suggested we get a well-known app for open relationships to make things more exciting. But she quickly felt sorry for suggesting it. In the tranquil neighborhood of Willow Creek, Eleanor and Chester's marriage functioned like a well-tuned engine, efficient and dependable, yet missing the spontaneous fire of their initial years. Their home, with its meticulously maintained hedges and inviting interior, stood as a symbol of their shared life, yet echoed stories of routine patterns and muted conversations. On a crisp autumn evening, as the setting sun cast a golden hue over their living room, Eleanor brought up a topic that had been quietly brewing in her thoughts. Chester, comfortably settled in his preferred chair with a book, glanced up, his expression a blend of curiosity and astonishment. "Chester, do you ever feel like we're just going round in circles?" Eleanor inquired, her voice carrying a note of anxious energy. Chester put his book aside, focusing entirely on her. "What are you getting at?" "I mean, our life, it's cozy but, don't you miss the thrill? The unpredictability?" Eleanor toyed with her sweater's hem, trying to read his reaction. He reflected for a moment before responding, "I haven't really given it much thought." "Aren't you content?" "It's not about contentment. It's about fervor. I yearn for that zest we once had." Eleanor spoke softly, almost a whisper. Chester sat up, his brow creasing with concern. "So, what do you propose we do?" Taking a deep breath, Eleanor shared her idea. "I've been reading about open marriages and how they can reignite that zest. There's this app, tailored for couples like us, eager to explore while still deeply committed to one another." Chester's eyebrows rose in astonishment. "Open marriage? As in, dating others?" "Yes, but with limits. We lay down rules and keep our communication transparent." It's about adding some excitement to our lives, not substituting what we already have, Eleanor elaborated, her gaze seeking his understanding. Images of unfamiliar faces, late nights, and an entirely different world flashed through Chester's mind. He cherished Eleanor, but the idea of her with someone else made him uneasy, yet the sincere appeal in her eyes was something he couldn't overlook. "Are you certain about this?" he questioned, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Eleanor nodded. "I've pondered it thoroughly. It's not about dissatisfaction, but exploration. I think it could bring us some joy." Chester exhaled, a mixture of caution and affection in his gaze. "All right, let's try it. But we need clear rules. And if either of us feels uneasy, we stop. Agreed?" "Agreed," Eleanor said, a faint smile playing on her lips, her heart a tangle of excitement and apprehension. That evening, as they downloaded the app and set up their profiles, the atmosphere buzzed with a novel vitality, a fusion of eager anticipation and nervousness. Unbeknownst to them, this choice would unravel their lives in unexpected ways, steering them down exhilarating yet heartrending paths. As they drifted off to sleep, each absorbed in their own thoughts, the glow of a notification illuminated the screen of Eleanor's phone. A new match had appeared. Their adventure had just begun. The ensuing weeks brought a transformation that was both invigorating and disconcerting for Eleanor and Chester. The app, with its sleek and user-friendly design, opened a door to an uncharted world. They would sit together, sometimes engulfed in tense silence, other times forcing laughter, as they scrolled through profiles and deliberated over potential matches. Eleanor's first rendezvous was with a man named Alex. He was charismatic and articulate, and their coffee date held surface-level promise. However, as she sat opposite him, idly stirring her latte, Eleanor experienced a twinge of something indescribable. Was it guilt, or perhaps disillusionment? The interaction, though cordial, lacked substance, leaving Eleanor with a lingering sense that this was not what she had been searching for. Conversely, Chester's experience diverged significantly. He connected with Clara, a lively and adventurous woman who seemed to rekindle a long-dormant spark within him. Their conversations were dynamic, peppered with playful banter and understated flirtations. When they eventually met for drinks one evening, the attraction was palpable. Chester found himself unexpectedly drawn to her, captivated by her infectious laughter and enthralling stories. Eleanor observed the shift in Chester. He appeared more vibrant, frequently smiling at his phone, a certain light in his eyes. This contrast to her own encounters left her feeling uneasy. Each date she embarked on seemed more like an obligation, a stark reminder of what was lacking in their marriage and absent in these transient meetings. One evening, as they lay in bed, the gap between them more pronounced than ever, Eleanor turned to Chester. "How's it going with Clara?" she inquired, striving for nonchalance. Chester, momentarily taken aback, paused before replying. "It's going well. She's intriguing." Eleanor nodded, feeling a knot form in her throat. "Do you like her?" The question escaped her before she could restrain it. Chester turned to face Eleanor, his expression a complex tapestry of emotions. "I do enjoy her company, yes. But Eleanor, this was your initiative. Are you reconsidering?" Eleanor grappled with her emotions, uncertain how to express the inner chaos. "I'm not sure, Chester. I hoped this would bring us closer, yet I feel more distanced from you now." Chester extended his hand, clasping hers gently. "We can halt this if you wish. This was meant to strengthen us, not to seek something superior." Eleanor clutched his hand, feeling a surge of appreciation mixed with perplexity. "Let's continue a little longer. Perhaps I just need to adjust to it." As time progressed, the couple persisted in their endeavor. Chester's interactions with Clara grew more frequent, each encounter leaving him invigorated yet conflicted. Eleanor's dates, conversely, deepened her sense of emptiness. The app, once a beacon of new experiences, now seemed like a chasm driving them apart. One night, after a particularly lackluster date, Eleanor came home to find Chester absent, his note on the counter indicating he was out with Clara. Alone in the silent house, Eleanor confronted the magnitude of what she had instigated. Regret swelled within her, the initial excitement of the app replaced by a profound sense of loss. She longed for Chester, for what they had, and couldn't shake the feeling that their pursuit of thrill might have jeopardized the very essence they sought to preserve. The crisp onset of winter ushered in a newfound clarity for Eleanor. The days shortened, and the nights were filled with quiet reflections and unvoiced regrets. She often found herself alone, Chester regularly out with Clara. The house, once a haven of their affection, now echoed the remnants of a relationship fraying at its seams. One night, as Eleanor sat curled on the couch, a book abandoned in her lap, she recognized the depth of her yearning for the past, for the times with Chester. It wasn't merely the joy or the shared experiences, but the solace in being each other's steadfast companion amidst life's uncertainties. The app, intended to rekindle their spark, had instead cast a pall over their once vibrant connection. Resolved, Eleanor decided it was time to address the situation head-on. She waited for Chester, rehearsing her thoughts, each word heavy with the burden of her feelings. When Chester finally entered, there was a fleeting glimpse of the man she had married, caught off guard yet genuinely happy to see her waiting. "Chester, we need to talk," Eleanor began, her voice resolute yet her hands subtly revealing her anxiety. Chester's smile dwindled, giving way to a look of worry. "What's the matter, Eleanor?" "It's about the app, about us. I can't keep doing this," Eleanor admitted, her gaze fixed on him. "I miss you, I miss us. Entering this open relationship was a mistake." Chester's face revealed a tumult of feelings. "Eleanor, I had no idea you felt this way. I assumed you were comfortable with everything." Eleanor shook her head, a single tear escaping. "I thought I would be, but I'm not. It's tearing me apart, Chester. Can we return to how it used to be? Just the two of us?" A prolonged silence hung in the air, laden with unvoiced truths and newfound realizations. Chester averted his gaze, his voice a mere whisper. "I don't know if I can, Eleanor." Her heart plummeted at his words. "What do you mean?" "Clara, it's not just casual anymore. I've developed feelings for her, Eleanor. It wasn't intentional, but it's happened." Eleanor felt the room reel as his words sunk in. The walls, their shared memories, all seemed tainted with a sense of betrayal. "So, what are you saying? That we're done?" Eleanor's voice was a blend of anger and sorrow. "I'm not sure, Eleanor. I'm so confused. I love you, but what I have with Clara is different. I need time to figure things out," Chester responded, emotion cracking his voice. Eleanor stood up, feeling a vast gap opening between them. "I never imagined that opening our marriage would lead to losing you," she murmured, her voice faint. Chester reached out to her, but Eleanor pulled back. "I need to be alone," she whispered, leaving the room, leaving Chester amidst the ruins of their once shared dreams. That night, Eleanor lay awake, the ceiling staring back at her, as the harsh reality of their situation settled in. Her intent had been to rekindle their relationship spark, but instead, she had inadvertently set their world aflame, reducing their love to ashes. The realization was bitter, and the future, uncertain. The days that followed their devastating talk were steeped in a heavy silence. Eleanor and Chester, once inseparable, now navigated their shared space like remote satellites, their exchanges marked by a stilted politeness more painful than any open conflict. Eleanor battled a whirlwind of emotions. She swung between rage and sorrow, frequently blaming herself for initiating the change that now loomed as a threat to end their marriage. She revisited their shared past in her mind, each memory a poignant echo of what they stood at the verge of losing. Chester, too, was deeply torn. His experiences with Clara had unveiled a new kind of joy, one he hadn't known he was missing. Yet, the prospect of losing Eleanor, his companion of many years, left an emptiness within him. He found himself in an emotional stalemate, unable to fully lean towards either side. One evening, as they sat at opposite ends of the dinner table, the strain became insufferable. Eleanor placed her fork down, steeling herself. "Chester, we can't continue like this. We need to make a decision about where we stand." Chester lifted his gaze, eyes filled with exhaustion. "I know, Eleanor. I've been thinking a great deal about us, about everything." "And?" Eleanor urged, her heart racing. "I've grown to care for Clara, more than I anticipated. But I also can't envision a life without you," Chester admitted, his voice tinged with pain. Eleanor's frustration surged. "Do you love her, Chester?" He paused, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I believe I do. But that doesn't negate my love for you." Tears gathered in Eleanor's eyes. "How can you say that? How can you claim to love me yet be willing to risk everything we've built?" Chester extended his hand, but Eleanor drew back. "I never intended to hurt you, Eleanor. This was meant to be something light, something to enhance our connection. I didn't foresee falling for someone else." Eleanor rose, her chair scraping loudly. "But you did, Chester. And now I'm supposed to simply accept it? To share you with someone else? It's not about sharing, Eleanor. I'm as bewildered as you are." "I never meant for any of this to happen," Chester implored, his own eyes brimming with tears. Eleanor felt a deep sense of loss wash over her. "But it did happen, Chester. And now we're faced with the repercussions. I sought your love and fidelity, and you couldn't offer it to me. Not completely, not anymore." Chester lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. "What are you suggesting, Eleanor?" "I'm suggesting that perhaps it's time for us to acknowledge the end. I can't stay in a marriage where I'm vying for my husband's love," Eleanor said, her voice faltering. The finality of her statement lingered heavily in the air. Chester looked up, his face marked by profound sadness. "Is there no way to mend this, Eleanor? I don't want to lose you." Eleanor shook her head, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I think we've already lost one another, Chester. We crossed a boundary that we can't reverse." With those words, Eleanor walked away, leaving Chester alone with his reflections and regrets. That night, the house felt more desolate than ever, a hollow shell of the sanctuary it once was, echoing with the remnants of a once unbreakable love. In the ensuing weeks, Willow Creek bore witness to the gradual dissolution of what was once seen as an indestructible bond between Eleanor and Chester. The atmosphere in their home, previously rich with shared aspirations and joy, now carried a somber stillness, a reflection of their shattered love. Eleanor spent her days in a numb state, every action feeling mechanical and purposeless. Her heart ached with a loss so profound it felt almost physical. She painfully acknowledged that her attempt to reinvigorate their marriage had, in fact, extinguished it. The app, once a portal to excitement, now stood as a harsh reminder of her misjudgment. Chester, for his part, was equally adrift in a sea of regret and confusion. His affection for Clara had deepened, yet it was marred by guilt and remorse over the anguish he had inflicted on Eleanor. He was torn between his new feelings and the history he shared with Eleanor, a history that now felt like pages from a long-forgotten book. The decision to separate, though unspoken, hung between them like a dense fog. They began leading separate lives within the same house, their interactions minimal, courteous, and stripped of the warmth that once defined their relationship. One chilly morning, Eleanor approached Chester, her resolve clear. "Chester, I believe it's time for us to move forward. Separately." Chester met her gaze, his eyes mirroring the sorrow of a lost love. "I suppose there's no going back now, is there?" "No, I don't believe there is," Eleanor replied softly. "We've undergone a transformation, Chester. What we once shared, it's vanished." Her words, though delivered gently, carried the weight of an era coming to an end. They proceeded to discuss the practical aspects, the house, their possessions, their shared finances, with a composure that masked the emotional turmoil within. As the days passed, their home evolved from a place of shared existence into a staging ground for their individual futures. Boxes filled with memories were packed away, each item a reminder of a different era, a different rendition of themselves. The day Chester departed was crisp and clear, reminiscent of the days they had once spent together, exploring the town or lounging in their backyard. However, now it marked the conclusion of their shared journey. "Goodbye, Eleanor," Chester said, standing at the threshold, holding a box of his belongings. "Goodbye, Chester," Eleanor responded, her voice steady but her eyes holding back unshed tears. And with that, Chester walked out of the door, exiting the life they had meticulously constructed together. Eleanor watched him depart, feeling a blend of relief and profound sorrow. In the ensuing weeks and months, Eleanor and Chester charted their new courses. Eleanor found comfort in her friends and interests, gradually rediscovering her individuality and resilience. Chester, now with Clara, embarked on a fresh chapter, yet often cast a nostalgic glance backward, pondering what might have been. Their narrative, a tale of love, exploration, and loss, lingered in the tranquil streets of Willow Creek. It served as a poignant reminder that sometimes, in the pursuit of something more, one might forfeit the very thing they held most dear. Eleanor and Chester, once inseparable, now treaded separate paths, their hearts carrying the scars of a decision that altered everything. "We seemed like a great couple, but then I found out she was unfaithful with 3 different men in our home, caught on cameras I had put up. I got my revenge by revealing this to everyone at our 10th wedding anniversary party." In the peaceful Maplewood suburb, with its blooming cherry blossoms and immaculate lawns, Suzanne and Paul Thompson's home stood proudly. Their charming Victorian house, boasting an elegant wraparound porch, was more than just brick and mortar, it represented their deep love, a union others admired. Paul, an accomplished architect, and Suzanne, a celebrated art curator, were perceived as an ideal couple, revered in their tight-knit community. Their romance was a favorite tale at social gatherings, a journey from college sweethearts to devoted life partners, seemingly strengthening with each year. Paul's steady nature perfectly balanced Suzanne's exuberance, and her creative flair added a unique charm to his orderly life. Together, they were a perfect mix of ardor and consistency. As they neared their 10th wedding anniversary, the Thompsons were the talk of the town. Their unwavering bond was exemplary, with friends and family often seeking their counsel on love and relationships. Their home was a haven of joy and hospitality, hosting both lavish and informal gatherings with grace. Yet, beneath this ideal exterior, a different story was unraveling, one unknown to Paul. It started subtly: Suzanne's late nights at work, unplanned business trips, a new set of friends she kept separate from Paul. He interpreted these as normal fluctuations in marriage, never doubting her love or loyalty. Then, a day came that turned Paul's world upside down. Planning to surprise Suzanne for their anniversary, he installed an advanced security system with hidden cameras in their home, a token of his love and care for their shared space. What these cameras recorded, however, was far from the loving gestures he anticipated. The footage shockingly exposed a side of Suzanne he had never seen. In their home, where they had crafted a decade of memories, Suzanne was unfaithful, not with just one, but 3 different men, each incident more heartbreaking than the last. Paul discovered this heart-wrenching truth alone in his study one evening. This room, once his refuge for architectural creativity, now felt like a prison. The images on his screen cut through his heart, shattering his trust and love. The partner he had adored and trusted without question had fragmented their life together. Disbelief and denial quickly turned to profound pain, engulfing him completely. The woman he loved had destroyed the world they built together. Paul sat, immobilized, watching the romance he cherished crumble before him. Memories of their life together with Suzanne, the laughter, shared aspirations, intimate moments, now seemed like a meticulously crafted deception. In the quiet of the night, only the screen's glow lit up his tear-soaked face, as his once perfect existence shattered around him. This discovery signaled the end of an era for Paul and the start of a dark path, driven by betrayal and a thirst for vengeance. As dawn broke, bringing light to a new day, he sat still, a man changed by a truth beyond his wildest thoughts. The morning sun bathed Maplewood in a golden hue, casting its light on the Thompson residence. Inside, the silence was broken only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. In his study, Paul remained motionless, his eyes red and empty. Photos of him and Suzanne, once treasured, now taunted him as remnants of an illusory life. Hour after hour, Paul watched the damning footage repeatedly, each viewing cutting deeper into his heart. The Suzanne on the screen was unrecognizable to him. Her laughter, her touch, her tender words to those men felt foreign yet agonizingly familiar. It was an uncanny contrast between the Suzanne he knew and loved and the deceptive figure he now faced. Plagued by unanswerable questions, Paul's mind raced. How long had this been happening? Why did she do it? Were there others? The trust and love that once formed their marriage's bedrock were now replaced by a gaping void of betrayal and pain. As the weight of Suzanne's unfaithfulness sank in, Paul's grief turned to rage. He pondered the deceitful tales she must have spun, the fabricated excuses to conceal her infidelities right under his nose. With time, his heart, once brimming with love, was now filled with a seething need for retribution. Amidst this turmoil, Paul recalled their upcoming 10th wedding anniversary party, planned as a grand celebration of their union. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. This event, meant to be a testament to their joyous relationship, now posed a chance for him to expose Suzanne's treachery to everyone. The concept of vengeance began to crystallize in Paul's mind. He imagined Suzanne's expression of shock and humiliation as he revealed her betrayal in front of their friends and family. This vision granted him a frigid satisfaction. It wouldn't heal his hurt, but it would demonstrate the repercussions of her actions. As daylight faded to evening, Paul started formulating his plan. He had to behave normally around Suzanne to keep her from suspecting anything. Concealing his inner chaos would be challenging, yet he was resolute. His genuine love for her had transformed into the driving force for his impending reprisal. That evening, as Suzanne returned home, lively and unsuspecting, Paul greeted her with a contrived smile. During their subdued dinner, Suzanne talked about her day, unaware of the turmoil within her husband. Paul replied with nods and half-hearted smiles, his thoughts haunted by the scenes he had uncovered. Post-dinner, they went their separate ways, Suzanne to her art studio, and Paul to his study. Alone, he pondered over the anniversary party invitations, now carrying a grim meaning. He held one, tracing its elegant lettering. This invitation had morphed into a summon to an entirely different event, one that would shatter the illusion of their perfect union. Lying in bed later, Paul recognized the irreversibility of his chosen path. There was no retreat from the scheme he had initiated. The once affectionate husband had transformed into a man with a mission, propelled by the immense power of a shattered heart. In the days leading to the party, Paul's life became a display of guile and pretense. He operated mechanically, his smiles hollow, portraying the attentive spouse while consumed with the elaborate details of his vengeance. Suzanne, completely oblivious to the looming tempest, was absorbed in the excitement of the forthcoming celebration. Her vibrancy in arranging the event contrasted sharply with Paul's inward brooding. He engaged with the right responses, yet his heart was detached. Behind the scenes, Paul meticulously arranged his scheme. He checked the guest list, ensuring all significant friends and family would witness Suzanne's disgrace. He liaised with caterers and decorators, maintaining the image of a devoted husband planning a surprise for his wife. The pivotal aspect of his plan involved the three men from the video. Through social media investigation and discreet questioning, Paul identified them. He sent them anonymous invites, cunningly composed to intrigue them without disclosing too much. Their presence was vital, as they were the central figures in the impending dramatic revelation. As the day of the celebration neared, an unmistakable tension permeated the Thompson household. Paul experienced it in every strained conversation, shared meal, and moment in Suzanne's presence. He was leading a dual existence, outwardly a devoted husband, yet inwardly a man racked with pain and longing for vengeance. During the preparations, flashes of their past joyous times together would unexpectedly come to mind. Shared laughter in the living room and now set up for the event, affectionate moments in the kitchen where trivialities were now discussed, deep talks in the bedroom that felt more like a conflict zone. These recollections served as painful reminders of what was lost, strengthening Paul's determination. The evening before the event, as Paul lay beside Suzanne, his mind was a whirlpool of emotions. Anger and hurt were predominant, but also a deep sorrow. He grieved the end of the love they once shared, the dreams they had nurtured together. But there was no room for regret. He was committed to the path he had chosen. The morning of the party dawned bright and clear. The Thompson home buzzed with activity as caterers, decorators, and staff scurried about, preparing for the night. Suzanne was aglow with excitement, completely unaware of Paul's somber mood. As the guests started arriving, Paul put on his facade of normalcy. He welcomed friends with a friendly smile, engaged in small talk, and assumed the role of the perfect host. But inside, his heart was icy, his determination unyielding. That night, the facade of their ideal marriage would be dismantled for all to see. The scene was ready, the players in position, and as the evening unfolded, Paul geared up to end the pretense his marriage had become. The time had come for the final revelation, a moment that would alter everything. In the lead-up to their grand 10th anniversary, Maplewood buzzed with excitement. The Thompson celebration was set to be magnificent, evident in every detail carefully overseen by Suzanne. Paul, however, felt like a mere observer in the drama of his life, the burden of his forthcoming disclosure growing heavier as the hours passed. The day before the party, their home was transformed into a grand venue. Florists decorated the spaces with beautiful blooms, chefs prepared exquisite meals, and a jazz band set up, ready to provide a night of enchanting music. Amidst this hustle, Suzanne was the epitome of joy and anticipation, blissfully ignorant of the looming storm. Paul, meanwhile, embodied a picture of inner conflict. Watching Suzanne, he was flooded with memories of their life together, their first date, their wedding, the myriad of joyful moments they had shared. These once cherished memories now served as painful reminders of betrayal. His heart was torn between sorrow and anger, reflecting on the love that once flourished and the anguish that had taken its place. As evening approached, the house was set for the party, looking more splendid than ever, ostensibly a venue for celebrating love and dedication. But for Paul, it felt like the backdrop for an impending tragedy. That night, as they retired to separate rooms, the gap between Paul and Suzanne extended beyond the physical. It was as though an unseen barrier had risen, isolating their worlds. Suzanne dreamt of a perfect anniversary, while Paul was consumed by thoughts of deceit and the looming revelation. He mentally rehearsed his plan, ensuring every detail was accounted for. The footage was primed for display, the guests were all notified, and the stage was set for the disclosure. Paul was aware that his actions would signal the end of their marriage and unravel the life they had built. Yet, he was driven by a relentless need to disclose the truth. In the solitude of the night, Paul wrestled with various emotions. A part of him still harbored love for Suzanne, wishing this all to be just a bad dream. But the stark reality of her betrayal was inescapable. The pain she had inflicted was too profound, the hurt too raw. As dawn ushered in the day of the party, Paul awoke from a restless night. The house lay tranquil in the soft morning glow, oblivious to the dramatic events about to unfold. Dressing quietly, each action brought him closer to the inevitable confrontation. The day passed swiftly, with guests arriving in the evening, dressed elegantly, ready to celebrate the Thompsons' decade together. They were welcomed by the seemingly happy couple, unaware of the underlying strain. As the evening progressed, Paul's determination grew stronger. It was time to abandon the charade and expose the hidden truth behind the smiles and celebrations. The night was about to take an unforeseen turn, a revelation that would shatter the facade of a perfect union. The Thompsons' 10th anniversary was an event to behold. The house, glowing in warm light, was filled with the sound of guests, all oblivious to the tension simmering beneath. Suzanne, looking stunning, mingled effortlessly, her laughter echoing. Paul, maintaining the role of a courteous host, appeared calm but distant, his gaze often introspective. As the evening unfolded, the moment Paul had been preparing for inched closer. The atmosphere was charged with unspoken expectancy, though only he was aware of the brewing tempest. The jazz band's melodies created a deceptive ambience of joy and festivity. Finally, the moment for speeches arrived. The guests, with glasses in hand, gathered around as Paul took center stage. He began with an homage to their marriage, choosing his words meticulously, his voice unwavering. He talked about love and partnership, about overcoming challenges together, eliciting nods and smiles from the audience. Suzanne, standing by him, glowed with pride, oblivious to the edge she was teetering on. Then, Paul's tone shifted. A hush fell over the room as his words darkened. He spoke of trust and betrayal, his eyes fixed on Suzanne, who returned his gaze, first with confusion and then with dawning horror. Silently, Paul signaled the AV technician. The lights dimmed, and the screen came alive, showing the first video he had captured. A collective gasp rippled through the room as the footage played, starkly revealing Suzanne's unfaithfulness. In those moments, Suzanne's world shattered. She faced the stunned expressions and judgmental stares from friends and family, Paul's cold, accusing gaze, and the undeniable evidence of her betrayal displayed for all to see. She recoiled, covering her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The revelations continued, each video striking another blow to the illusion of their perfect marriage. The three men, also among the guests, were revealed, their identities laid bare. They stood, embarrassed and ashamed, their heads lowered. As the final video concluded, a deafening silence engulfed the room. Paul's face showed a mix of deep sorrow and a bitter sense of triumph. He had laid bare her betrayal but at the expense of his own inner peace. Suzanne, now the target of collective disdain, attempted to speak, to explain, to apologize, but words eluded her. The friends she had valued turned away, the love she had overlooked vanished, and her familiar life disintegrated. In the aftermath, the fallout for Suzanne was devastating. Shunned by friends, ostracized by the community, she lost her job and her social status. Once a vibrant and beloved figure, she became a pariah, her name a symbol of treachery and duplicity. Paul, despite achieving his vengeance, found no comfort in Suzanne's ruin. The love he once held for her turned to dust, leaving him hollow and isolated in the remnants of their once joyful home. The tale of Paul and Suzanne Thompson didn't culminate in a celebration of a decade of marriage, but in a tragic revelation that ripped apart lives and left only desolation. In his quest for revenge, Paul lost everything, and Suzanne, formerly the heart of every gathering, was reduced to a mere shadow, an emblem of the cost of betrayal and the destructive nature of revenge.